Canada just walked away from a $19 billion F-35 deal, rejecting the most advanced fighter jet in the U.S. arsenal. Instead of bowing to pressure from Washington, Ottawa is turning to Europe, signaling a potential break with America's military-industrial dominance. But this isn't just about jets. It's about power, control, and a global defense realignment that could reshape NATO itself. With Trump demanding NATO allies buy American or face consequences, why is Canada defying him now? How does this decision impact defense contracts, economic ties, and long-term military strategy? And could this be the first step toward Canada breaking free from U.S. military influence altogether? This isn't just a policy shift. It's a geopolitical power play with billion-dollar stakes. So why is Canada making this move? And what happens next? Let's break it down. Did Canada just deliver the ultimate military snub to Trump? Canada's abrupt rejection of the $19 billion F-35 procurement deal is a direct challenge to Washington's dominance in allied defense contracts. The decision comes at a moment when Donald Trump is increasing pressure on NATO members to buy American-made weapons or risk a strained alliance. According to Bloomberg, the move represents a break in the 20-year U.S.-Canada military procurement tradition, with Ottawa now considering European alternatives instead. Defense analyst Richard Abulafia told the Wall Street Journal that Canada's exit from the F-35 program is about more than just costs. It's about autonomy. The F-35's $1.7 trillion lifetime operational cost and high maintenance demands create long-term U.S. dependency. Lockheed Martin's fighter jet locks its buyers into a system where Washington controls upgrades, spare parts, and mission capabilities, he said. Canada's exit from this structure signals a move toward greater defense sovereignty and aligns it with European suppliers who offer more operational flexibility. Defense disagreements between the U.S. and Canada are rare. But not since the Avro-Arrow debacle in 1959 has Ottawa defied Washington so openly on military procurement. The F-35 rejection could be the most significant defense policy rift in over 60 years. According to Reuters, Trump's administration has privately warned Canada that bypassing U.S. defense contracts could affect future intelligence sharing agreements under the Five Eyes alliance. The timing is critical. With Trump pushing NATO countries to increase defense spending while simultaneously threatening to cut U.S. military commitments in Europe, Canada's rejection of the F-35 appears to be a calculated risk. Defense spending accounted for 1.38% of Canada's GDP in 2023, well below NATO's 2% target. By choosing European jets, Ottawa signals it is diversifying its military strategy rather than solely relying on Washington's defense umbrella. Canada's defense policy has historically been tightly integrated with U.S. military infrastructure. Its fighter jets, surveillance systems, and missile defense capabilities are directly linked to NORAD, which operates under American leadership. However, by rejecting the F-35, Canada appears to be restructuring its procurement strategy to avoid long-term reliance on Washington's technology and decision-making. A report from Jane's Defense Weekly highlights that the F-35 requires continuous U.S. software updates to remain operational, making allied nations dependent on Pentagon oversight for mission readiness. The Saab Gripen E, now a frontrunner for Canada, allows for full domestic control over system modifications, giving Ottawa a level of strategic autonomy it wouldn't have with Lockheed Martin's aircraft. Portugal was among the NATO nations initially expected to purchase the F-35, but in 2023, Lisbon abandoned the program. The Portuguese Air Force cited prohibitive maintenance costs and low availability rates, with F-35 readiness levels hovering around 55% globally, according to a U.S. Department of Defense report. Canada, facing similar budget constraints, appears to have taken note. A 2023 study by the Canadian Department of National Defence found that maintaining an F-35 fleet over 30 years would exceed $50 billion, nearly double the cost of maintaining existing CF-18s. Saab's Gripen E, in contrast, offers a 50% lower operational cost per flight hour, and does not require U.S. intervention for parts or servicing. Canada's shift toward the Saab Gripen E isn't just about cost. It's about operational independence and adaptability. A 2024 study by the RAND Corporation found that the Gripen's average cost per flight hour is $4,700, compared to over $36,000 for the F-35. Additionally, Gripen aircraft are designed for Arctic conditions, aligning with Canada's need for cold weather operability. Saab CEO Mikael Johansson told Financial Times that unlike the F-35, Gripen E operators can perform on-site software updates and hardware modifications without waiting for U.S. approval. This autonomy allows Canada to retain full control over its Air Force capabilities, free from Washington's restrictions on upgrades and mission configurations. With Sweden now a NATO member, the Gripen is increasingly viewed as a viable alternative for nations seeking to diversify their defense portfolios. If Canada finalizes this shift, it could trigger a broader reevaluation of U.S. defense reliance across NATO allies. Walking away from the F-35 program means forfeiting billions in U.S. defense contracts that were expected to flow into Canadian aerospace firms. According to Bloomberg, Lockheed Martin had outlined plans to provide $16 billion in subcontracting opportunities for Canadian suppliers had the country remained in the Joint Strike Fighter (JSF) program. With this exit, companies like Magellan Aerospace and Aero DevTech, which manufacture F-35 components, could lose key contracts, potentially cutting hundreds of skilled jobs. However, experts argue that aligning with European defense manufacturers could compensate for some of these losses. Sweden's Saab Group has proposed a technology-sharing agreement with Canada that would allow domestic firms to co-develop fighter jet components, similar to its arrangement with Brazil, which secured $9 billion in aerospace investments after choosing the Gripen E. The question now is whether Canada can successfully pivot to European defense partnerships without long-term economic fallout. The decision to reject the F-35 aligns with Canada's growing defense collaborations with European nations, particularly Sweden, France, and Germany. Over the past 2 years, Ottawa has expanded military technology exchanges with these countries, including a 2023 agreement with France's Dassault Aviation to explore advanced aerospace defense cooperation. According to Reuters, Germany has also begun discussions with Canada on joint naval production, indicating a broader shift in Ottawa's defense strategy. The Swedish Gripen deal is particularly telling. Sweden has long advocated for a NATO-aligned but U.S.-independent defense structure, and Canada's interest in the Gripen E suggests alignment with this philosophy. A 2024 report from the European Defense Agency notes that European arms manufacturers have seen a 32% rise in NATO contracts over the past 5 years, partially due to allied nations seeking alternatives to U.S. dominance in weapons procurement. With Canada now leaning toward European technology transfers, its military integration with the continent appears to be accelerating. Trump's Buy American doctrine has created growing resistance within NATO, with allies actively seeking ways to reduce U.S. military dependence. Canada's rejection of the F-35 is part of a larger trend. Germany has prioritized European-made defense systems. Poland has signed major deals with South Korea's KAI for Fa-50 fighter jets, and Turkey has expanded its procurement from domestic manufacturers like Baykar Technologies instead of relying on U.S. suppliers. According to the Wall Street Journal, European nations have increased non-U.S. defense contracts by 40% since 2022, citing concerns over Washington's politicization of military deals. Trump's warning that NATO members must boost defense spending or risk reduced U.S. military support has fueled skepticism over long-term reliability. By opting out of the F-35 program, Canada has positioned itself alongside other NATO members, diversifying their defense portfolios. A move that could significantly weaken U.S. leverage over allied military policies. A major argument for Canada remaining in the F-35 program was military standardization, ensuring all NATO members operated compatible fighter jets for streamlined coordination. Without it, some defense analysts warn of logistical and strategic hurdles in joint operations. According to a 2024 report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, interoperability is a key concern, as Canada's shift to European aircraft may create difficulties in joint combat exercises and rapid deployment scenarios. However, critics argue that Canada's move towards self-reliance actually strengthens security by reducing dependence on a single supplier. A 2023 RAND Corporation study found that over-reliance on one defense contractor, like Lockheed Martin, can lead to supply chain vulnerabilities. As the war in Ukraine has shown, countries with diverse military suppliers tend to adapt faster in crisis scenarios. The real question is whether Canada's decision will inspire other NATO members to rethink reliance on U.S. military hardware, potentially reshaping global defense procurement trends. Canada's F-35 rejection marks one of the most significant breaks in U.S.-Canada military cooperation in modern history. But whether this is a temporary disagreement or a long-term split remains uncertain. Some experts argue that Canada is simply leveraging its options, using European defense partnerships to gain negotiating power with Washington. However, others see this as a fundamental realignment. A 2024 analysis by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SciPRI, found that countries reducing reliance on U.S. defense systems rarely reverse course, suggesting that once Canada locks in European suppliers, a return to American-made jets is unlikely. Trump's foreign policy stance has exacerbated existing NATO divisions, and Canada's decision could be the first in a series of military shifts among U.S. allies. The impact of this move will unfold over the next decade, determining whether Ottawa remains tethered to Washington's defense strategy or establishes an independent military trajectory. Canada's rejection of the F-35 deal isn't just about fighter jets. It's about power, independence, and shifting alliances. By turning toward European military technology, Ottawa is signaling that it's no longer willing to follow Washington's lead without question. But this raises even bigger questions. Will more NATO members follow Canada's lead and abandon U.S. weapons? Will Trump retaliate with economic or political pressure? And could this be the first real step toward a fragmented NATO? One thing is certain, this decision has global consequences. The battle over defense contracts and military independence isn't just happening in Canada. It's playing out across NATO, reshaping alliances and redefining global security for decades to come. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.